One of the things I love about B movies is seeing how the creators manage to tell an engaging story with drastically limited resources. As the philosopher G.K. Chesterton once said, art is limitation. The essence of a painting is its frame. An artist will always find ways to get around his limitations in order to make his vision become a reality. A great example of this would be the 1999 film Ice from the Sun by Eric Stanze. This movie manages to be entertaining, terrifying, and visually impressive. It's been over 15 years since its release, and I'm still amazed by how well the effects hold up, despite all the advances in technology made since then. The story follows a group of friends who are transported to an alternate dimension where they're tortured and killed by an evil wizard named Abraham. Abraham can manipulate his realm, allowing him to exploit his victims' greatest fears. A woman named Allison is brought back to life after committing suicide and is recruited to stop Abraham's mayhem. Abraham's power has become too great and poses a threat to the authorities of both heaven and hell. However, Abraham's world is protected by a barrier of ice from the sun, which only mortals can penetrate. If successful, and Allison manages to stop Abraham's reign of terror, she will be forgiven of her sins and spared from eternal damnation. The only way Abraham can be defeated is if he's reminded of his humanity, which he abandoned for power centuries ago. This would cause him to temporarily lose control of his dimension, melting the ice and allowing the agents of heaven and hell to come in and take him out. After Abraham's victims are sufficiently tortured and murdered, Allison finally confronts the sadistic wizard. She denounces Abraham's power and calls him a coward who tortures humans in order to validate his own fragile sense of self. Drawing upon the feelings of sadness and loneliness that led to her suicide, Allison is able to connect with Abraham through their mutual anxieties about the future and fears of the unknown. Abraham is unable to deny Allison's words and realizes that despite his godlike powers, he is still nothing more than a lowly human. As he laments over his failures, the ice begins to melt, freeing the souls of his victims and ushering in Abraham's death. There are so many elements to this movie that hit you all at the same time. From the second it begins, you're smacked in the face by an array of stimuli that just assault the senses. The unique style of Ice from the Sun tells a story unlike any I've seen before. Bizarre images are dispersed meticulously throughout scenes, creating an eerie atmosphere akin to an ancient crypt or a satanic ritual. The sound and color changes from scene to scene, giving you the sense you are no longer in a reality that you recognize. From the moment you enter Abraham's world, the laws of nature you are accustomed to, the comforts of certainty from a life of thoughtless repetition have been recklessly abandoned and replaced with chaos. Your senses cannot be relied on. Your eyes and ears fail to make sense of what they're perceiving. In this new reality, anything can happen. You're navigating a labyrinth with no clear direction, while the Minotaur awaits somewhere in the darkness, ready to devour your soul the moment you let your guard down. Except this labyrinth has no walls or exits, and the Minotaur is a god, whose only purpose is to make you suffer. Death is the only egress from pain, but it will not come easily. Within this strange dimension, your enemy isn't a serial killer with a machete hiding in the shadows, or an existential threat that you may perceivably escape from. Reality itself is your enemy, and pain and death are natural law. Abraham is like Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, a killer who infiltrates the dreams of his victims and kills them in a world created by their own subconscious minds. Only Abraham drags his victims into his own dreams, and into the mind of a madman. There is no safety, there is no mercy. These concepts don't exist in this reality. If you manage to escape an immediate danger, it's only because an even more horrifying fate is waiting for you. Abraham's power is absolute. His word is law. He watches constantly, waiting to remind you of his supremacy. You are his prisoner. Ice from the Sun explores the origins of fear and concludes that at the core of human anxiety is the fear of losing control of one's fate. Abraham tortures his victims one by one, delving deep into their souls, unearthing all their secrets. The mind is an open book to the Dark Wizard, who uses his knowledge to exploit his victims' fears and forces them to suffer through their own personal hell. Physical and psychological pain accosts the victim, who is powerless to resist, and who eventually submit to their suffering as they wait for their inevitable death. The pain that Abraham inflicts upon others is a reflection into his own soul, exposing his internal anxieties. He is no longer a powerless human, forced to follow the laws of those who reign above. He has become a god himself, who follows no other word but his own. However, while freeing him from the restrictions of his mortal body, the infinite power of a god has also served as a constant reminder of the powerless human he once was. He grows to despise his former life. He begins referring to the man he had been as a character who no longer exists, distancing himself from the past as if it were someone else's life. The wizard isolates himself on a new plane of existence outside of heaven and earth. He grows anxious over his limitations and fearful that he may be dethroned. He molds his world into one without free will, where everything bends to his every whim, as if he were nature itself. He allows nothing to act outside his control. Not a single leaf may fall without him willing it so. Abraham seals his world off from the gods he despises for threatening his authority, and he tortures the humans who remind him of what he once was and how powerful he has become. Free will belongs to the strong, and only he is strong enough to claim this right. He's like a dictator whose power has corrupted him, leading to paranoid delusions of rebellion and conspiracy. As a demonstration of his strength, the dictator has suspected traitors beheaded in front of his subjects in order to ward off any future threat and to reassure himself of his absolute power. Abraham's insecurities shine brightest during his interactions with his many victims. When the character Dana manages to escape a monster created to torture her, the wizard chooses to punish her defiance by having her legs tied to the back of a truck, which drives off, dragging her naked body behind it to be torn apart. When the truck finally stops, she's covered from head to toe in blood and lacerations, barely resembling a human being. She reaches out to Abraham for any sign of mercy or pity. He rejects her pleas for basic humanity and literally throws salt on her wounds. Only when he has decided that she has suffered enough does he grant her the mercy she'd begged for by crushing her skull and killing her. Later on, the character Aaron manages to escape certain doom, only to run into Abraham moments later. Demonstrating his superiority over humans, Abraham challenges him to a game of wills, resulting in Aaron's face melting off. The only thing these characters were guilty of was trying to survive, yet their demonstration of free will and unwillingness to submit to fate was seen as an insult to Abraham, a form of blasphemy worthy of punishment. Despite there being a ton of elements to appreciate in this film, it isn't without its flaws. While most of the complaints I've heard over the years boil down to personal preference toward artistic choices, there are a few problems that I felt necessary to mention. As far as the characters were concerned, there really wasn't a whole lot of development for the majority of them. You learn just enough about the victims to know what they're afraid of, so that their tortures make sense. However, beyond that, you really aren't given any reason to care about them. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, since knowing more about them wouldn't have changed their fate or much of the plot. They're mostly just devices to move from one scene to the next. Still, establishing more of a connection with these characters would have made them more sympathetic when being tortured to death. Act 1 of this movie was a bit weak compared to the second act and everything following. The opening credits were awesome and reminded me of a music video for a metal band. You can judge for yourself. Now that's how you make a fucking title sequence. I was so pumped for the rest of the movie after that. Unfortunately, what we got next was less fun. After Allison kills herself, a disembodied voice starts explaining the plot to her. Here we're met with a long, drawn-out exposition scene that's made worse by the monotone manner that the voice talks in. I understand that the disembodied voice is meant to sound otherworldly, as if it transcends human emotions, but it just sounded bored and disinterested. If Allison wasn't already dead, she would have surely killed herself just to escape this scene. I thought the idea of a voice speaking to Allison when her soul was between life and death was interesting, and I don't think that explaining plot elements in this manner was inappropriate. I just wish it hadn't sounded so dry and lifeless. The voice in no way sounds urgent or concerned over the threat Abraham apparently poses, and Allison doesn't seem alarmed or confused by the fact that a fucking disembodied voice is now speaking to her. She just kind of accepts it. When Allison very reasonably asked how she's supposed to stop an all-powerful wizard who controls his own reality, here's how the voice responds.
How do I assassinate him?
You cannot kill him yourself. You must make him remember his former life. You must make him recognize that he was once a human, a man capable of experiencing love. If he remembers, the ice containing his realm will begin to melt. The angels and the devils will soar through the openings in the dissolving ice walls. We will enter his domain and destroy him forever.
How can I make him remember?
Be patient, Allison. Go forward. Be strong.
Seriously? That's it? Just figure something out? The fuck kind of help is that? You have both heaven and hell coming together to fight this evil wizard, and your only advice is figure it the fuck out on your own? Must defeat this all-powerful reality-bending demigod. Okay, how do I do that? Listen, bitch, I have someone on the other line. Just figure something out. Seriously, nothing else? The forces of heaven and hell couldn't forge her some kind of weapon? Maybe a sword or a magic stick? Does he have a gluten allergy she can exploit? Anything? As I said earlier, this all works out in the end. Allison uses her experiences to relate to Abraham and remind him of what it means to be human. But this seemed like an awfully big risk, especially considering that he could have killed her at any point in the movie. I can't help but wonder, did the agents of heaven and hell just have a lot of faith in Allison's ability to relate to others? Or were they just not that concerned about her well-being and figured that if things went to shit, they could just send someone else to take her place out of fear of eternal damnation? Maybe the demons of hell came up with this plan and outvoted heaven for a more humane plan. It just seems like a real dick thing to do, sending an emotionally damaged woman to face off against a nearly immortal wizard without so much as a plan or a weapon, and telling her that if you fail, you're going to rot in hell for the rest of eternity. The way Abraham's victims end up in the wizard's realm is just plain weird. This guy is given a magic box and then, well, watch this.
I've been working on rearranging, revising. I've been working really hard on this. I want it to be perfect. What the fuck is this? Take us! Take us! Take us! Take
Buck,
us!
stop it! What's
Take
wrong with
us!
you?
I don't believe this.
Take us! Take us!
What's wrong?
Take
We wait around
us.
here for hours and you
Take
can
us.
show up and start acting like a
Take
fucking
us.
freak?
Take us! We should call somebody!
Buck, stop it!
Take us!
What the fuck was that? He acts like he's about to present his college dissertation or something. Then he starts chanting, "Take us," over and over. We don't even get a Klaatu Verata Nikto. And what the fuck is with this stack of papers? Was he afraid he was going to forget his one line? This whole scene is just so laughably ridiculous. So this movie had a weak opening, but it picks up from there and becomes awesome. Up until and including the conclusion. Overall, Ice from the Sun is a great film. Provided that the graphic violence and offensive content doesn't bother you, this movie personifies why I enjoy watching low-budget films. It's easy to find a terrible B-movie with horrible effects, cheesy acting, and stupid plots. But if you're willing to wade through all the shitty films out there, you'll eventually find a movie worth watching. A B-movie that manages to entertain and impress you, because you know it was made by people who had a clear vision of what they wanted and had the drive and the talent to make it a reality, regardless of, or perhaps because of, their limitations. I give this movie an 8 out of 10, which translates on our shot scale as 2 shots out of 10, meaning that I only needed 2 shots of some kind of alcoholic drink to get through this movie. Mostly for the first 20 minutes. And speaking of alcohol, if you find this movie difficult to get through due to the violent content, then here are some drinking games you can play to drink away this flick. Every time this movie switches from color to black and white, take a drink. Every time Abraham confronts one of his victims, take a drink. Every time Allison interacts with one of Abraham's victims, take a drink. Every time someone dies, take a drink. And finally, every time something just bizarre happens, take a drink. And those are your ways to drink away this flick. That's the end of this review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments about Ice from the Sun, or if you have any other movies you'd like me to review, leave a comment in the section below. And visit our website, bmoviebros.com, where Corey and I review low-budget films just like this one. So, till next time, thanks for watching.